The blood on Rebecca Allen's dress had been there for 3 days when she finally stumbled into Lordsburg, New Mexico, and the first person who saw her screamed that she was either a ghost or a liar. It was September 1882, and the desert sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street as Rebecca stood swaying on legs that barely held her weight. Her dark hair hung in tangled mats around her face, her lips were cracked and bleeding, and her hands were scraped raw from crawling through brush and rock. But it was the blood, dried to a rust-brown color across the front of her blue calico dress, that made the gathering crowd take several steps back. "Help me," Rebecca whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please, someone help." Martha Simmons, the banker's wife, pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. "Lord have mercy, what happened to you, girl?" "They attacked the stage," Rebecca said, her green eyes wide and haunted. "Outside of Stein's Pass. Raiders. They killed everyone. The driver, the guard, the other passengers. I hid under the coach after it overturned. I stayed there until they left, and then I walked." The crowd murmured. Rebecca felt their eyes on her, studying her, measuring the truth of her words against something she could not see. "Where's the blood from?" asked Samuel Harris, who ran the general store. "The woman sitting next to me," Rebecca said, her voice breaking. "Mrs. Henderson from Silver City. She was shot in the chest. She fell on me. I tried to help her, but she died so quickly." Martha Simmons narrowed her eyes. "Margaret Henderson?" "I do not know her Christian name. She told me she was traveling to visit her daughter in Tucson." "Margaret Henderson does not have a daughter," Martha said slowly. "She has 2 sons, both living in Silver City." Rebecca shook her head, confusion clouding her exhausted features. "I must have misheard. Everything happened so fast, and I was so frightened." "Convenient," muttered someone in the crowd. "What's convenient?" Rebecca asked, turning toward the voice. "What do you mean?" Marshall Davis pushed through the gathering crowd, his silver badge catching the sunlight. He was a stocky man with iron gray hair and a face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "Miss, I am going to need you to come with me and give a full account of what happened." "Of course," Rebecca said, relief flooding through her. "Thank you. We need to send help in case anyone else survived. We need to track those raiders." The marshal's expression remained neutral. "We will see about that. Come along now." Rebecca followed him to the marshal's office, her legs trembling with each step. Behind her, she heard the whispers starting like wildfire. "Did you see her dress? Hardly torn at all. If she walked all the way from Stein's Pass, where are her shoes? Probably at the bottom of a whiskey bottle. I heard she's been traveling alone from town to town, with no family and no prospects." Rebecca turned back, stung. "That is not true. I am traveling to California to meet my brother. He has a ranch near Sacramento and sent me money for passage." But the crowd had already begun to disperse, their minds made up about something Rebecca did not yet understand. Inside the marshal's office, Davis gestured to a chair and poured her a cup of water from a pitcher. Rebecca drank it so fast she choked, then held out the cup for more. The marshal refilled it and sat behind his desk, watching her with an expression that might have been sympathy or might have been suspicion. "Start from the beginning," he said. Rebecca told him everything. She had boarded the westbound stage in Deming 3 days ago. There had been 4 passengers, including herself: an older woman who said she was Mrs. Henderson, a salesman named Porter who sold farm equipment, and a young man who never gave his name and slept most of the journey. The driver was called Jim, and the guard riding shotgun was younger, perhaps 20, with red hair. "We were maybe 2 hours out from Lordsburg when they came," Rebecca said, her hands shaking around the tin cup. 6 or 7 men on horseback, wearing bandanas over their faces. They fired shots, and the horses panicked. The coach overturned. I remember the terrible sound of the wood splintering, and then I was underneath it, pinned between the luggage and the wheel. "You were not hurt in the crash?" Davis asked. "Bruised. Scraped. But nothing broken." "I could hear everything, though." The raiders shot Mr. Porter when he tried to run. They shot the guard. The driver was already dead, his neck broken in the fall. Mrs. Henderson was still in the coach, bleeding. She was making these awful sounds, gasping. I wanted to help her, but I could not move, could not make a sound, or they would find me. And the young man? I do not know what happened to him. I heard him talking to the raiders, heard his voice, then a gunshot, then silence. Davis wrote something in a ledger. Did the raiders take anything? I assume so. I heard them going through the luggage, through the bodies. They were there for perhaps 30 minutes. Then they rode away, heading south. And you waited? For hours, until I was certain they were gone. Then I crawled out. Everyone was dead. I tried to find water among the wreckage, but there was none, only broken bottles. So I started walking. I followed the road because I was afraid if I did not, I would get lost in the desert. That was 2 days ago? 3. I walked at night when it was cooler. I hid during the day. I found a small water hole the second day, just a muddy trickle, but it kept me alive. Davis studied her for a long moment. Miss Allen, I am going to be straight with you. I sent a rider out to Stein's Pass yesterday after we heard a stage was overdue. He found nothing. No overturned coach, no bodies, no sign of any attack. The office seemed to tilt around Rebecca. That is not possible. It happened. I was there. My deputy is a good tracker. If there had been an attack where you described, he would have found evidence of it. Then he did not look in the right place, Rebecca said, her voice rising. Maybe I was confused about the exact location. I was terrified and exhausted, but it happened. Marshall, I swear to you it happened. The stage from Deming arrived in Lordsburg yesterday afternoon, Davis said quietly. On schedule. The driver's name is Jim Holloway. His guard is a red-haired young man named Patrick O'Reilly. There were 3 passengers, none of them matching the descriptions you gave. Rebecca stood up so fast, the chair fell backward. No, that is wrong. I was on that stage. I boarded it in Deming with my ticket and my luggage. My trunk has my initials on it, R.A. for Rebecca Allen. Miss Allen, is it possible you are confused? Perhaps you had an accident and hit your head. Sometimes people have very vivid dreams after a head injury. I am not confused, and I did not dream this, Rebecca said, tears starting to stream down her face. Why would I dream such a horrible thing? Why would I walk for 3 days through the desert if nothing had happened? That is what I am trying to understand, Davis said, not unkindly. Is there someone we can contact for you? Family? My brother, but he is in California. I have no one else. My parents died 5 years ago. Yellow fever in Houston. Thomas is all I have left, and I have not seen him in 3 years. I saved every penny to make this journey. Why would I make up such a terrible story? Some folks do things for attention, Miss Allen, or because they are troubled in their minds. The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She stared at the marshal, understanding finally settling over her like a suffocating blanket. They did not believe her. They thought she was lying or insane. I need to rest, she whispered. I need to sleep and eat, and then I can explain better. Please. Davis sighed. There is a boarding house 2 streets over, run by Mrs. Kelly. She is a good woman. I will walk you there and see if she has a room. But Miss Allen, I want you to think very carefully about your story. If you are in some kind of trouble, if you need help, there are better ways to ask for it than inventing a stagecoach massacre. Rebecca wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him understand. But she was too exhausted, too defeated. She simply nodded and followed him out into the brutal afternoon sun. The boarding house was a 2-story adobe structure with a covered porch and pots of struggling geraniums by the door. Mrs. Kelly was a round woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled into a neat bun. She took one look at Rebecca and clucked her tongue. Lord, what happened to this poor child? That is what we are trying to figure out, Davis said. She needs a room and a hot meal and probably a doctor to look her over. Of course, of course. Come in, dear. Let's get you cleaned up. Rebecca let herself be led inside to a small room on the second floor with a narrow bed and a washstand. Mrs. Kelly brought hot water and soap, and Rebecca scrubbed the blood and dirt from her skin until the water turned brown. She washed her hair 3 times, working out the tangles with her fingers until her scalp ached. Mrs. Kelly took the ruined dress away and brought a simple gray cotton dress that was too large but clean. You rest now, Mrs. Kelly said. I will bring you soup in a while. Rebecca lay down on the bed, intending to gather her thoughts and make a plan. Instead, she fell immediately into a dark, dreamless sleep. When she woke, it was morning. Pale sunlight streamed through the window, and Rebecca felt a moment of disorientation before memory came flooding back. She sat up, her body stiff and sore, and found a tray on the bedside table with cold soup and bread. She ate mechanically, forcing herself to swallow even though she had no appetite. She needed to make them believe her. She needed to prove she had been on that stage. Rebecca dressed and went downstairs. Mrs. Kelly was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough. Feeling better, dear? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Yes, thank you. Mrs. Kelly, I need to get a message to my brother in California. Can you tell me where I might send a telegram? Telegraph office is next to the bank. But dear, I should tell you there has been talk. What kind of talk? Mrs. Kelly looked uncomfortable. Folks saying you made up that story about the stage attack, saying you are looking for sympathy or trying to stir up trouble. Why would I do that? Rebecca asked, her voice tight. I do not know, dear. I am just telling you what people are saying. Some folks say you were probably drunk or taking laudanum and imagined the whole thing. Others say you are trying to get attention, maybe hoping some man will feel sorry for you and offer marriage. That is absurd, Rebecca said, her cheeks flushing. I do not want anyone's pity, and I certainly do not want to trick someone into marrying me. I want to get to California and start a new life with my brother. That is all I want. I believe you, dear, Mrs. Kelly said, though her eyes said she was not entirely sure. But you should know, the town has made up its mind about you. Rebecca left the boarding house feeling hollow. She walked through Lordsburg's dusty streets, feeling eyes on her from every window and doorway. Conversation stopped when she passed. Women pulled their children closer. Men tipped their hats, but did not meet her gaze. The telegraph office was a narrow building that smelled of paper and ink. The operator was a thin man with spectacles who looked up nervously when Rebecca entered. I need to send a telegram to my brother in Sacramento, Rebecca said. That will be $2, the operator said. Rebecca opened the small purse that had been tied to her waist throughout her ordeal. Inside was the last of her money, $3.20. She counted out $2 and dictated her message. Thomas. Arrived New Mexico. Trouble. Please send help. Your sister Rebecca. The operator wrote it down and promised it would be sent within the hour. Rebecca left and stood on the street, unsure where to go or what to do next. She could not afford to stay at the boarding house for long. She could not continue to California without more money, and she could not stay in a town that thought she was either a liar or a lunatic. Miss Allen? Rebecca turned to find a man approaching her. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore dusty work clothes, scuffed boots, and a hat pushed back on his head. His eyes were a striking pale blue, almost gray, and they studied her with an intensity that made Rebecca want to look away. Yes, she said cautiously. My name is Lucas Monroe. I own a cattle ranch about 15 miles north of here. I heard about what happened to you, and I wanted to talk to you about it. I am sure you heard all the same things everyone else heard, Rebecca said bitterly. That I am a liar or a madwoman. I heard what you told the marshal, Lucas said, and I believe you. Rebecca stared at him. You do? Can we talk somewhere more private? Maybe get some coffee? Rebecca hesitated. She knew nothing about this man except that he was apparently the first person in Lordsburg who did not think she was insane. That could mean he was genuinely kind, or it could mean he had ulterior motives. But she was desperate and alone, and she had no better options. "All right," she said. They walked to a small restaurant at the edge of town. Lucas ordered coffee and pie for both of them, and they sat at a corner table where they could talk without being overheard. Rebecca studied him while they waited for their order. He was perhaps 30 years old, with strong hands scarred from hard work and a face that was more weathered than handsome. But there was something steady about him, something solid that made Rebecca feel slightly less adrift. "Why do you believe me?" Rebecca asked. "Everyone else thinks I invented the entire story." "Because it makes no sense for you to lie about it," Lucas said simply. "If you wanted attention or pity, there are 100 better stories you could have told. A dead husband, a sick child, a robbery where you lost everything. Why invent a stagecoach massacre that can be easily disproved? Why put blood all over yourself and walk through the desert until you almost died? That is not the behavior of someone seeking attention. That is the behavior of someone who survived something terrible." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what it means to hear someone say that." "I also know the country around Stein's Pass," Lucas continued. "It is rough terrain, easy to get turned around if you are not familiar with it. If the attack happened a few miles off the main road, or if the raiders moved the coach afterward to hide the evidence, the marshal's deputy could easily have missed it." "Why would they move the coach?" "To buy time. If there is no evidence of an attack, no one goes looking for raiders. They have days to disappear across the border into Mexico or up into the mountains." The waitress brought their coffee and pie. Rebecca wrapped her hands around the warm cup and felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "Will you tell me exactly where you think the attack happened?" Lucas asked. "Describe the landscape, any landmarks you remember." Rebecca closed her eyes and tried to recall details through the fog of terror and exhaustion. "We were following the road west. I remember there were mountains to the north, very rugged. We passed through a narrow section where the road ran between rock walls, and then it opened up into flatter ground. That is where they hit us, on the flat ground. I remember thinking it was strange because there was no cover for them to hide behind, and yet they seemed to come out of nowhere." "How far from the narrow section?" "Not far, maybe a mile." "I am not certain." Lucas nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I know that area. There is an old prospector's trail that runs parallel to the main road, hidden by a ridge. Raiders could have used it to track the stage and then cut across to intercept it. And if the attack happened on the flat ground, there are several arroyos nearby where they could have pushed the wreckage to hide it." "You think it is still there?" Rebecca asked, hope rising in her chest. "I think it is worth looking. If we find evidence of the attack, we can prove you were telling the truth." "Why would you do this for me?" "You do not know me." Lucas took a sip of his coffee and set the cup down carefully. 3 years ago, my sister told my family that her husband was beating her. She came home with bruises, a split lip, a broken rib. My father did not believe her. He said she was exaggerating to get sympathy, that she always had a flair for the dramatic. He sent her back to her husband. 2 months later, we buried her." Rebecca drew in a sharp breath. "I am so sorry." "I swore I would never make the same mistake my father made," Lucas said, his voice rough with old pain. "I would never dismiss someone's truth just because it was uncomfortable or inconvenient. So when I heard your story, and I heard how quickly this town decided you were lying, I knew I had to at least listen. And having listened, I believe you." "Thank you," Rebecca said again, inadequately. "Can you ride?" Lucas asked. "Yes, though it has been a while." "Good. I need to get back to my ranch today, but I can come back tomorrow morning with an extra horse. We will ride out to Stein's Pass and search the area. If we find evidence of the attack, I will bring the marshal out and make him see it. And if we do not find anything, Lucas met her eyes steadily, then we keep looking until we do, or until we are certain there is nothing to find. Either way, you will know the truth. Rebecca felt something unknot in her chest, something she had not realized was twisted so tight. This stranger believed her. This man she had known for less than an hour was willing to help her when everyone else had turned away. I do not know how to thank you, she said. No need for thanks. Just be ready to ride at first light tomorrow. They finished their coffee, and Lucas walked her back to the boarding house. As they passed through the town, Rebecca saw the curious stares, the whispers behind hands. But with Lucas walking beside her, tall and solid and unshakable, she felt less like she was drowning. One more thing, Lucas said as they reached the boarding house steps. Do not let what these people think change who you are. You know the truth. Hold on to that. Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She spent the rest of the day in her room, avoiding the stares and whispers. Mrs. Kelly brought her dinner on a tray, along with the news that several people had come by asking about her. What did they want? Rebecca asked. Mostly just curious, I think, though Martha Simmons suggested we should not be harboring a woman of questionable character under our roof. I am not a woman of questionable character, Rebecca said wearily. I am just someone who survived something terrible and has the misfortune of not being believed. I am starting to think you might be telling the truth, dear, Mrs. Kelly said quietly. You do not act like someone seeking attention. You act like someone who has been through an ordeal. Thank you, Mrs. Kelly. That night, Rebecca lay in bed and thought about Lucas Monroe. He was the first person to show her genuine kindness since she had arrived in Lordsburg. More than kindness, he had offered her something infinitely more valuable: belief. He believed her story when no one else would. He was willing to help her find proof when it would have been easier to dismiss her, as the town had done. Rebecca wondered about his sister, about the tragedy that had shaped him. She wondered what kind of man spent his days running a cattle ranch and his nights remembering past failures. She wondered if she would find the evidence she needed, or if this was just another cruel twist in an already impossible situation. Sleep came eventually, and with it nightmares of overturning coaches and gunshots and blood soaking into blue calico. Lucas arrived at the boarding house just after dawn, leading 2 horses. Rebecca was waiting on the porch, dressed in the gray cotton dress and a sunbonnet Mrs. Kelly had lent her. Lucas looked at her shoes, worn leather boots that had seen better days, and frowned. Those will have to do, I suppose. We will take it slow. He helped her mount the smaller of the 2 horses, a bay mare with gentle eyes. Rebecca settled into the saddle and felt muscle memory take over. It had been 3 years since she had ridden, but her body remembered. They rode east out of Lordsburg into the rising sun. The desert landscape was harsh and beautiful, all scrub brush and red rock and endless sky. Lucas set an easy pace, letting the horses warm up as the day grew hotter. Tell me about your ranch, Rebecca said, wanting to break the silence. It is called the Double M, after my father, Michael Monroe. He started it 20 years ago with 100 head of cattle and a lot of dreams. Now we run about 2,000 head, employ 15 men year-round. It is good land, plenty of water from underground springs. Do you run it alone? My brother helps when he is not gambling or drinking his way through Tucson. Mostly, it is me and my foreman, a man named Cole, who has been with us since the beginning. It sounds like a lot of work. It is, but it is my work, my land. I would not trade it for anything. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Rebecca found herself studying Lucas when she thought he was not looking. He sat his horse with easy confidence, moving with the animal rather than against it. His hands on the reins were gentle but firm, and he scanned the landscape constantly, reading it in a way Rebecca could not. You really think we will find something? Rebecca asked. I think if the attack happened the way you described, there will be evidence. The question is whether we can find it. They reached the narrow pass Rebecca remembered, where the road ran between high rock walls. Lucas slowed their pace, his eyes studying the ground. They passed through the narrow section and emerged onto flatter ground. "This is it," Rebecca said, her voice tight. "This is where it happened. I remember that rock formation to the north and the way the ground slopes down toward the south." Lucas dismounted and began examining the road. Rebecca watched as he walked back and forth, occasionally crouching to look more closely at something. After several minutes, he shook his head. "The road has seen a lot of traffic since your attack. Any tracks or bloodstains would have been obscured." "So we will not find anything?" Rebecca asked, disappointment crushing her. "I did not say that. I said we will not find anything on the main road. But if I was raiding a stage and wanted to hide the evidence, I would not leave it on the road." He mounted his horse again and gestured toward the south. "There are several arroyos in that direction, deep enough to hide a coach. Let's try there." They rode south, moving slowly through the scrubland. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace. Rebecca felt sweat trickling down her back, felt her throat growing dry. Lucas stopped occasionally to check their position and scan the landscape. It was nearly noon when Lucas held up a hand, signaling Rebecca to stop. He was staring at something on the ground ahead. Rebecca rode up beside him and looked down. There, partially hidden by brush, was a deep gouge in the earth, as if something heavy had been dragged. "Wait here," Lucas said. He dismounted and followed the gouge, moving carefully. Rebecca watched as he walked toward a deep arroyo, its walls hidden by scrub oak and mesquite. He disappeared over the edge, and Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest. Minutes passed. Then Lucas reappeared, his face grim. He climbed up out of the arroyo and walked back to Rebecca. "It is there," he said quietly. "The overturned coach, the bodies, everything." Rebecca felt the world spin. She had been right. It had happened. She was not a liar or a lunatic. It had really happened. "I need to see," she whispered. "No, you do not. Trust me, you do not want those images in your head again. But I need to see. I need to know it is real." Lucas studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He helped her down from her horse and led her to the edge of the arroyo. Rebecca looked down and immediately wished she had not. The stagecoach lay on its side at the bottom of the arroyo, one wheel shattered, the luggage scattered around it. The bodies had been ravaged by scavengers and the desert sun, but they were still recognizable as human. 4 of them, just as Rebecca had described. Rebecca turned away and vomited into the brush. Lucas held her shoulders gently until she was finished, then offered her his canteen. She rinsed her mouth and spat, her hands shaking. "I am sorry you had to see that," Lucas said. "I needed to know it was real," Rebecca said. "I needed to know I was not going mad." "You are not going mad. You told the truth, and now we have proof." They rode back to Lordsburg in the brutal afternoon heat. Rebecca felt numb, caught between vindication and horror. She had been right, but being right meant those people were really dead, meant she really had hidden beneath a coach while they were murdered. Marshal Davis was standing on the porch of his office when they rode up. He took one look at Lucas's face and straightened. "You found something," Davis said. It was not a question. "We found everything," Lucas said. "The coach, the bodies, all of it." Miss Allen was telling the truth. The marshal's face went pale. "Show me." Lucas, Rebecca, and the marshal rode back out to the arroyo with 2 deputies. When the lawmen saw the carnage at the bottom of the ravine, their faces went hard. "I owe you an apology, Miss Allen," Davis said gruffly. "I should have looked harder. I should have believed you." "You should have," Rebecca agreed, too exhausted for politeness. They spent the next several hours recovering the bodies and examining the scene. The raiders had been thorough, taking everything of value and leaving only the dead, but they had made mistakes. There were tracks leading south toward Mexico and shell casings from at least 3 different types of weapons. "I will send word to the territorial marshal," Davis said. This is bigger than a local matter now. 4 people murdered, a stage destroyed. They will want to put together a posse. And Miss Allen? Lucas asked, his voice carrying an edge. She was telling the truth, Davis said. I will make sure everyone in Lordsburg knows it. But as they rode back to town in the gathering dusk, Rebecca wondered if it would matter. She had been telling the truth all along, and that had not stopped the town from turning on her. Would proof change their minds, or would they simply find something else to judge her for? The answer came quickly. By the time they reached Lordsburg, the news had spread. People lined the street, watching as Rebecca rode past with Lucas and the marshal. Their faces showed shame, curiosity, pity, but no warmth. No one apologized. No one met her eyes. Rebecca felt the weight of their judgment settle over her like a shroud. She had been vindicated, but she had not been forgiven. The town had decided she was trouble, and finding the proof of her story only confirmed that decision. She was the woman who had survived a massacre, the woman who had brought death and horror to their doorstep. Lucas helped her dismount in front of the boarding house. Mrs. Kelly was waiting on the porch, her face troubled. "Oh, my dear," she said. "I heard. I am so sorry." "For what?" Rebecca asked tiredly. "I was telling the truth." "I know, dear, but truth does not always make things easier." Rebecca climbed the stairs to her room and lay down on the bed without undressing. She stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out what to do next. She was stranded in a town that did not want her, waiting for a response from a brother who might not even receive her telegram, haunted by the memory of 4 dead bodies rotting in a desert arroyo. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Rebecca opened it to find Lucas standing in the hallway, his hat in his hands. "I wanted to make sure you were all right," he said. "I am alive," Rebecca said. "I suppose that is something." "It is more than something. You survived. You fought to be believed. You proved everyone wrong. And now they hate me even more for it." Lucas stepped into the room, and Rebecca was too tired to object to the impropriety. He turned his hat in his hands, clearly uncomfortable. "I know what it is like to be on the outside," he said. "After my sister died, I blame myself. I should have stood up to my father, should have taken her away from her husband myself. I let other people's opinions matter more than the truth, and it cost my sister her life. When I came back to Lordsburg after her funeral, everyone looked at me differently. They knew I had failed her. They knew I was weak. It took years to rebuild my reputation, to prove I was someone who could be trusted." "How did you do it?" Rebecca asked. "By being someone who could be trusted. By standing up for what was right, even when it was hard. By never letting anyone make me doubt myself again." He met her eyes. "You did not ask for this. You did not ask to be attacked, to have your word doubted, to become the talk of the town. But here you are, still standing. That takes strength." "I do not feel strong," Rebecca whispered. "I feel broken." "Broken things can be mended," Lucas said, "if you are willing to do the work." He left shortly after, and Rebecca lay back down on the bed. She thought about his words, about strength and truth and the long road to redemption. She thought about his sister and about the guilt that had shaped him into the man who had believed Rebecca when no one else would. And she thought about how, despite everything, she was glad to have met Lucas Monroe. The next few days were difficult. The territorial marshal arrived with a posse and questioned Rebecca extensively about the attack. She told her story over and over until the words felt meaningless. They brought her items recovered from the wreckage and asked her to identify them. She recognized Mrs. Henderson's carpet bag, Mr. Porter's sample case, the luggage that had belonged to the quiet young man whose name she had never learned. The marshal's investigation confirmed Rebecca's account in every detail. The attack had happened exactly as she described. The raiders had fled into Mexico and would likely never be found. The victims' families were notified. Funeral arrangements were made. And through it all, the people of Lordsburg watched Rebecca with wary eyes. She was no longer a liar, but she was something worse, a reminder of violence and death, a woman who had seen horrors and survived them. She was bad luck, a dark cloud, someone to avoid. Rebecca spent most of her time in her room at the boarding house, venturing out only when necessary. She had not received a response to her telegram, and her money was running dangerously low. She needed to find work, but no one in Lordsburg would hire her. The general store did not need help. The restaurant had enough staff. Even the saloon turned her away. And that was when Rebecca knew she was truly unwanted. It was Mrs. Kelly who finally sat her down and spoke plainly. "Dearie, you cannot stay in Lordsburg," the older woman said gently. "This town has made up its mind about you, and nothing you do will change it. You need to move on." "I have no money to move on," Rebecca said. "And even if I did, where would I go? I cannot reach California without funds, and I have heard nothing from my brother." "Then you need to find work elsewhere. There are other towns, other opportunities." "Who will hire me? Everyone knows my story by now. I am the woman from the stage massacre, the woman who was not believed, the woman who brings bad luck." "Mrs." Kelly sighed. "I do not know, dear, but you cannot stay here." That evening, Rebecca sat on the porch of the boarding house and watched the sun set over the desert. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, beautiful and indifferent to human suffering. She thought about her parents, dead 5 years now. She thought about her brother Thomas, who might not even know she needed help. She thought about the long journey from Houston, the dreams she had carried with her of a new life in California. "Mind if I sit?" Rebecca looked up to find Lucas climbing the porch steps. She gestured to the chair beside her, and he sat, stretching his long legs out in front of him. "I heard the marshal finished his investigation," Lucas said. "Yes. Everything I said was true, not that it matters." "It matters." "Does it?" "I am still unwanted here. I am still stranded with no money and no prospects. Being right did not change anything." Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Come work for me." Rebecca turned to stare at him. "What?" "Come work at the Double M. I need someone to help with the house, the cooking, the ranch accounts. My foreman Cole is good with cattle, but terrible with numbers. We have been muddling through, but we could use someone with sense and education. You want me to work as your housekeeper?" "Housekeeper, cook, bookkeeper, whatever you want to call it. The work is hard and the pay is modest, but you would have room and board, and you would be away from this town and its judgment." Rebecca's heart pounded. "Why would you do this? You barely know me. I know you are honest. I know you are brave. I know you need help, and I am in a position to offer it. That is enough." "People will talk," Rebecca said. "An unmarried woman living at your ranch." "People already talk," Lucas pointed out. "At least at the ranch you will not have to hear it." Rebecca looked out at the darkening sky. She thought about her options, which were essentially none. She could stay in Lordsburg and slowly starve. She could try to make it to another town on foot with no money. Or she could accept Lucas Monroe's offer and hope he was as honorable as he seemed. "All right," she said quietly. "I will come work for you." Lucas smiled, and it transformed his weathered face into something almost handsome. "Good. We will leave tomorrow morning." Rebecca spent her last night in Lordsburg packing the few belongings she had managed to acquire. Mrs. Kelly gave her the gray cotton dress and a spare blanket, refusing payment. Marshal Davis stopped by to give her the small amount of money that had been recovered from the stage wreckage, coins that had belonged to no one in particular. It was not much, but it was something. In the morning, Lucas arrived with the 2 horses and helped Rebecca settle her bundle behind the saddle. They rode north out of Lordsburg as the sun rose, leaving the town and its whispers behind. Rebecca did not look back. The Double M Ranch was beautiful in a stark, wild way. The main house was a sprawling adobe structure with a covered porch and green shutters. There were outbuildings for the hands, a barn, corrals, and endless stretches of grazing land dotted with cattle. In the distance, mountains rose, purple and blue against the sky. Lucas showed Rebecca to a small room off the kitchen. It had a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was simple and clean and smelled of sage. "Make yourself at home," Lucas said. "The kitchen is yours to command. Cole and I usually eat whatever we can throw together, so anything you cook will be an improvement. The ranch accounts are in the office, and I will show you those later. For now, just rest and get your bearings." Rebecca set her bundle on the bed and looked around the room. It was the first time in weeks that she had felt even remotely safe. No one here would whisper about her or judge her. No one here thought she was a liar or a lunatic. Over the next few days, Rebecca settled into life at the Double M. She discovered that Lucas had not been exaggerating when he said he and Cole ate whatever they could throw together. The kitchen was minimally stocked, the pantry disorganized, and the account books were a disaster. Rebecca threw herself into the work. She cleaned the kitchen from top to bottom, organized the pantry, made a list of supplies they needed. She cooked real meals: beef stew, fresh bread, roasted vegetables, apple pie. Lucas and Cole ate like starving men and thanked her effusively after every meal. She tackled the account books next, sorting through months of scribbled notes and crumpled receipts. She organized everything into neat columns, tracked expenses and income, identified areas where they were losing money unnecessarily. When she showed Lucas her findings, he whistled low. "We have been paying twice what we should for grain," he said, looking at her figures. "And apparently we bought the same horse twice from different sellers." "You need a better system," Rebecca said. "And you need to double-check everything before you make a purchase." "I need you," Lucas said, then seemed to realize how that sounded and cleared his throat. "I mean, the ranch needs you." "This is excellent work, Miss Allen. Please call me Rebecca. If I am going to be living here, we can drop the formalities." "Rebecca, then. And you should call me Lucas." As the days turned into weeks, Rebecca found herself relaxing in ways she had not thought possible. The work was hard but satisfying. Lucas and Cole treated her with respect and gratitude. The ranch hands were mostly shy around her, but not unkind. She was allowed to simply exist without constantly defending herself or her story. She also found herself noticing Lucas in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude. She noticed the way he moved, economical and graceful despite his size. She noticed his rare smiles and the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. She noticed his kindness toward the horses, his fairness with the ranch hands, his patience when things went wrong. She told herself it was natural to admire someone who had helped her so much. She told herself it meant nothing. But then there was the evening when a late summer storm rolled in, violent and sudden. Rebecca was in the barn checking on the horses when the rain started, coming down in sheets. She tried to make a run for the house but was drenched within seconds. Lucas appeared out of nowhere, throwing his coat over her shoulders and hustling her back to the house. Inside, he helped her out of his soaked coat and handed her a towel. Their hands touched briefly, and Rebecca felt something electric pass between them. She looked up and found Lucas watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "You should change into dry clothes," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "I do not want you catching a chill." Rebecca nodded and fled to her room. She changed into a dry dress and sat on her bed, her heart pounding. She was attracted to Lucas Monroe. Not just grateful, not just admiring, but genuinely attracted. And unless she was very much mistaken, he felt something for her, too. The realization terrified her. She was an employee, dependent on his generosity for her livelihood. She was a woman with a scandalous past, someone the entire territory likely knew about by now. She had no right to develop feelings for her employer, no matter how kind or handsome he was. Rebecca resolved to keep her distance, to maintain a professional relationship. but Lucas seemed determined to make that impossible. He found excuses to work near her, to ask her opinion on ranch matters, to share stories about his life. He brought her books from his small library when he learned she liked to read. He taught her to shoot, standing behind her to correct her stance, his hands steady on her shoulders. Cole, the ranch foreman, watched their growing closeness with barely concealed amusement. He was a grizzled man in his 50s with a dry sense of humor and a gift for reading people. "You two are dancing around each other like nervous colts," he said to Rebecca one afternoon while she was preparing supper. "I do not know what you mean," Rebecca said, her cheeks flushing. "Sure you do not. You like him, he likes you, and you are both too stubborn or scared to do anything about it. He is my employer. It would be inappropriate. Life is short, girl. My wife and I had 20 good years before the fever took her. I would trade everything I have for 20 more. Do not waste time worrying about what is appropriate when you could be building something real." Rebecca wanted to argue, but Cole's words stayed with her. She had survived a massacre. She had been accused of lying, ostracized by an entire town, left with nothing and no one. Lucas had believed her when no one else would. He had given her a safe place to land and rebuild her life. Was it so terrible to imagine that they could be something more than employer and employee? The decision was taken out of her hands on a clear October evening. Rebecca was sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, when Lucas came and sat beside her. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. "I need to tell you something," Lucas said finally. "And I need you to listen until I finish, because if I stop, I might lose my courage." Rebecca turned to look at him, her heart suddenly racing. "When I met you in Lordsburg, I told myself I was helping you because of my sister, because of the guilt I carry about not believing her. And that was true at first, but somewhere along the way, it became about more than that. It became about you, Rebecca. Your strength, your honesty, your refusal to let the world break you. I have been alone for a long time, and I told myself that was what I deserved after failing my sister. But then you came into my life, and suddenly I can imagine something different." Lucas turned to face her fully, his pale blue eyes intense. "I know I have no right to ask this. You work for me, you are dependent on me, and that makes this complicated. But I need you to know that I have feelings for you, deep and true. And if there is any chance you might feel the same way, I would like permission to court you properly." Rebecca felt tears sting her eyes. "Lucas, I am damaged goods. Everyone knows my story, knows what happened. I bring scandal and bad luck wherever I go." "You survived," Lucas said firmly. "That does not make you damaged, it makes you strong. And I do not believe in luck, good or bad. I believe in people making choices. I choose to believe you. I choose to give you a place here. And I choose to fall in love with you, if you will let me." "I am falling in love with you too," Rebecca whispered, the words torn from someplace deep and honest. "I have been fighting it because it seemed impossible, seemed wrong. But I cannot fight it anymore." Lucas reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle around hers. "Then do not fight it. Let us see where this goes." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Rebecca did not pull away. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and when they finally pulled apart, Rebecca was smiling. "People will talk," she said, echoing her earlier concern. "Let them," Lucas said. "I have learned that people will always find something to talk about. We might as well give them something good." Over the following months, Lucas courted Rebecca with old-fashioned intentionality. He brought her wildflowers from the range. He took her on rides to the prettiest parts of the ranch. He read to her in the evenings from books of poetry and adventure stories. He asked about her life in Houston, about her parents, about her dreams for the future. Rebecca blossomed under his attention. She laughed more freely, smiled more often. She began to believe that she could have a future beyond survival, beyond simply enduring. She began to imagine a life built on love and partnership. Cole watched their romance unfold with paternal approval. The ranch hands grew accustomed to seeing them together and treated Rebecca as the lady of the house even before any formal engagement. The Double M thrived under Rebecca's management, the accounts balanced, the household running smoothly, the meals hearty and delicious. In December, Lucas rode into Lordsburg for supplies and came back with interesting news. Marshall Davis had cornered him in the general store to pass along a letter that had arrived for Rebecca. It was from her brother Thomas. Rebecca tore open the letter with shaking hands. Thomas had received her telegram, but his response had been delayed because he was in the process of moving to a new ranch near San Diego. He was horrified to learn what had happened to her and full of apologies for not being there to help. He enclosed money for her passage to California and begged her to come as soon as possible. Rebecca stared at the letter, feeling torn. She had wanted this for so long, had dreamed of reaching California and starting over with her brother. But now she had something else, something she had not expected, a home, a purpose, and a man she was deeply in love with. Lucas read the conflict on her face. "You should go," he said quietly. "If you want to see your brother, if you need to know that option is still available to you, you should go." "I do not want to leave," Rebecca said. "I want to stay here with you." "Are you certain? I do not want you to have regrets." Rebecca took his hand and held it tightly. "I am certain. Thomas will understand. California was a dream from another life. This is my life now." She wrote back to Thomas, explaining everything. She told him about the attack, about Lordsburg, about Lucas and the Double M. She told him she was happy, truly happy, for the first time since their parents died. She promised to visit when she could and assured him she was exactly where she needed to be. Thomas's response came in late January. He was surprised but supportive. He wrote that he wanted to meet Lucas someday, to make sure his little sister was being treated properly. He sent his blessing and told her to write often. On a clear February morning, with the desert in bloom and the mountains sharp against the blue sky, Lucas took Rebecca riding to a high ridge that overlooked the entire ranch. They dismounted and stood together, looking out over the land. "This ranch has been my whole life," Lucas said. "It is everything my father built, everything I have worked to preserve and improve. But it has always felt incomplete, like something was missing. I know now that something was you." He turned to her and took both her hands in his. "Rebecca Allen, you are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. You survived something terrible. You fought for your truth when the world tried to silence you, and you built a new life from nothing. I want to spend the rest of my days loving you and supporting you. Will you marry me?" Rebecca did not hesitate. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." Lucas pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band set with a small blue stone. "It was my mother's," he said. "She died when I was 15, but my father kept her ring. He gave it to me before he passed, told me to give it to a woman worthy of the Monroe name. You are more than worthy." "Rebecca!" He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. They kissed there on the ridge, with the wind in their hair and the whole world spread out below them. They were married in March in a small ceremony at the ranch. Cole served as Lucas's witness, and they hired the local pastor to perform the service. Rebecca wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, and Lucas wore his best suit, the one he saved for town meetings and funerals. The ranch hands attended, along with a few neighboring ranchers who knew Lucas and respected his judgment. Conspicuously absent were the people of Lordsburg, though Rebecca did not mind. She did not need their approval or their presence. She had everything she needed right here. Mrs. Kelly sent a gift, a beautiful quilt she had made herself, along with a note saying she was happy for Rebecca and wished her all the best. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to Rebecca. At least one person from Lordsburg had seen past the scandal and recognized her for who she truly was. The wedding was simple but heartfelt. When Lucas said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. When Rebecca said hers, she meant every word. They promised to love and honor each other, to face whatever came together, to build a life based on trust and partnership. The kiss that sealed their marriage was tender and full of promise. Cole cheered, the ranch hands applauded, and Rebecca felt a joy so pure and complete it took her breath away. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Lucas held Rebecca close and whispered against her hair, "I will spend every day proving you made the right choice." "I already know I did," Rebecca whispered back. "You believed me when no one else would. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You loved me when I felt unlovable. I am exactly where I am meant to be." Their marriage was everything Rebecca could have hoped for and more. Lucas was a devoted husband, attentive and affectionate. He consulted her on ranch decisions, valued her opinions, and made it clear to everyone that she was an equal partner in both the marriage and the business. Rebecca thrived in her new role. She managed the household and the accounts with skill and efficiency. She learned about cattle ranching, about breeding and grazing and market prices. She rode out with Lucas to check on the herds, learned to recognize individual animals, understood the rhythms of the ranch year. She also began to heal from the trauma of the stage attack. The nightmares grew less frequent. She could talk about what happened without her voice shaking. She could pass through Lordsburg when necessary without feeling like she might shatter. The town's attitude toward her had softened somewhat after her marriage to Lucas. The Monroe name carried weight in the territory, and people were less willing to openly criticize her now that she was a respectable married woman. It was not quite forgiveness, and certainly not understanding, but it was better than outright hostility. In June, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. She told Lucas over breakfast, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went perfectly still for a moment, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. Then he set the cup down very carefully, came around the table, and pulled her into his arms. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "As certain as I can be. I have missed my courses for 2 months, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings." Lucas held her at arm's length and looked into her eyes. "How do you feel about this?" Rebecca smiled. Terrified, excited, happy, all of it at once. "I am going to be a father," Lucas said wonderingly. Then his face split into the biggest smile Rebecca had ever seen. "I am going to be a father." He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, and Rebecca clung to him and laughed too, caught up in his joy. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Rebecca continued to manage the household, though Lucas and Cole conspired to reduce her workload as much as possible. She sewed baby clothes, prepared a nursery in one of the spare rooms, and read every book about childbirth she could find. Lucas was attentive to the point of being slightly overbearing. He worried constantly about Rebecca's health, insisted she rest more, and nearly had a fit when he found her climbing a ladder to reach something on a high shelf. "You are going to drive me mad with your hovering," Rebecca told him fondly. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." "You are not just any woman," Lucas said stubbornly. "You are my woman carrying my child. I am entitled to worry." "Entitled to worry, yes. Entitled to wrap me in cotton wool and forbid me from living my life, no." They compromised. Rebecca agreed to avoid heavy lifting and dangerous activities. Lucas agreed to stop treating her like she was made of glass. In late December, when the desert winter was cold and clear, Rebecca went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Lucas paced outside the bedroom door in a state of absolute terror, certain he was about to lose the woman he loved. But Rebecca was strong, stronger than anyone realized. When the midwife finally emerged from the bedroom and announced that Rebecca and the baby were both healthy, Lucas nearly collapsed with relief. He went into the bedroom to find Rebecca propped up against the pillows, exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up when Lucas entered, and her smile grew wider. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Lucas approached the bed on shaking legs. Rebecca pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny red face, eyes squeezed shut, mouth opening and closing like a baby bird. The baby had a shock of dark hair and minuscule fists that waved aimlessly in the air. "He is perfect," Lucas whispered, awed. "He is absolutely perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Lucas nodded, unable to speak. Rebecca carefully transferred the baby into his arms, and Lucas looked down at his son with an expression of pure wonder. This tiny, fragile creature was his and Rebecca's, a life they had created together, a symbol of everything they had overcome and everything they had built. "What should we name him?" Rebecca asked. They had discussed names during the pregnancy, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking down at his son, Lucas knew exactly what the name should be. "Michael," he said, "after my father, Michael Thomas Monroe, to honor your brother as well." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "That is perfect." Little Michael Monroe thrived. He was a healthy, happy baby with a powerful set of lungs and an insatiable appetite. Rebecca took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, learning quickly and adapting to the demands of caring for an infant. Lucas was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son. He held Michael while Rebecca cooked dinner, sang lullabies in an off-key baritone that somehow soothed the baby, and changed diapers with only minimal complaining. Cole became an honorary grandfather, teaching Michael to wave his fists and making silly faces that sent the baby into fits of gurgling laughter. The ranch hands took turns standing guard outside the house at night, making sure nothing disturbed the new family. As Michael grew from infant to toddler, Rebecca watched him with a heart so full it sometimes ached. This little boy would never know the hardships she had endured. He would grow up loved and safe, surrounded by people who believed in him and supported him. He would have opportunities she could only dream of. And he would know the truth about his mother. When he was old enough to understand, Rebecca would tell him about the stage attack, about being disbelieved, about the cowboy who had faith when no one else did. She would teach him to stand up for truth, to believe people when they needed belief, to offer help without expecting anything in return. 2 years after Michael was born, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier and the labor shorter. They welcomed a daughter in the spring of 1886, a tiny girl with her mother's green eyes and her father's determined chin. They named her Sarah Grace Monroe, and she was as different from her brother as night from day. Where Michael was loud and boisterous, Sarah was quiet and thoughtful. Where Michael charged headlong into everything, Sarah hung back and observed first. Lucas loved both his children fiercely, but there was something about Sarah that made his heart melt. Perhaps it was because she reminded him of his lost sister, or perhaps it was simply that daughters have a way of wrapping their fathers around their little fingers. Life at the Double M settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered under Lucas and Rebecca's joint management. The cattle herds grew, the land proved productive, and their reputation for fair dealing and quality stock spread throughout the territory. Rebecca's relationship with Lordsburg remained complicated, but she no longer cared what the town thought of her. She had her family, her home, her purpose. She had survived the worst and built something beautiful from the ashes. The opinions of people who had doubted her were irrelevant. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Rebecca back to the ridge where he had proposed. They stood together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, and Lucas pulled Rebecca close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Giving up California, staying here, marrying me?" Rebecca turned in his arms and looked up at him. "Not for a single moment. This is where I belong, with you, with our children, on this ranch. This is my home." "You saved me, you know," Lucas said quietly. "After my sister died, I was drowning in guilt and regret, I was going through the motions of living without actually being alive. Then you came along and you reminded me what it means to fight for something, to stand up for truth, to believe even when it is hard. You gave me purpose again. You saved me too, Rebecca said. You believed me when the world called me a liar. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You loved me when I felt unlovable. We saved each other, Lucas. They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, two people who had found each other in the aftermath of tragedy and built something strong and lasting. As the years passed, Michael and Sarah grew into bright, curious children. Michael was adventurous and fearless, always exploring the ranch and getting into good-natured trouble. Sarah was quieter, but no less determined, with a gift for reading and a compassionate heart. Rebecca taught both children to read and write, using books from Lucas's library and materials she ordered from catalogs. She taught them arithmetic and history, geography and science. She wanted them to have every opportunity to grow up educated and capable. Lucas taught them to ride, to rope, to understand the land and the animals. He taught them about hard work and integrity, about treating people fairly and standing up for what was right. He told them stories about their grandparents, about the history of the ranch, about the wild territory they called home. And when the children were old enough, Rebecca told them her story. She told them about the stage attack, about being disbelieved and ostracized, about the cowboy who had believed her when no one else would. "Why did the people not believe you, Mama?" Sarah asked, her young face troubled. "Because sometimes people would rather believe comfortable lies than uncomfortable truths," Rebecca said gently. "Because I was a stranger, and it was easier to think I was lying than to accept that something terrible had happened. Because the world is not always fair or just." "But Papa believed you," Michael said. "Yes, your father believed me, and that made all the difference." "I would have believed you too, Mama," Sarah said fiercely. Rebecca pulled her daughter close. "I know you would have, sweetheart. You have a good heart, just like your father." In 1890, when Michael was 7 and Sarah was 4, Thomas finally made the journey from California to visit his sister. He arrived with his wife Maria and their 3 children, and the reunion was joyful and tearful. Thomas had changed in the years since Rebecca had seen him. He was heavier, with sun-weathered skin and laugh lines around his eyes. But his smile was the same, and when he hugged Rebecca, she felt like a little girl again. "I have missed you so much," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry I was not there when you needed me." "You are here now," Rebecca said. "That is what matters." Thomas and Lucas sized each other up carefully, 2 men who loved the same woman and needed to establish an understanding. But it did not take long for them to become friends. They were both ranchers, both devoted to family, both men of integrity. They spent hours talking about cattle and land management, swapping stories, and comparing strategies. Maria and Rebecca became instant friends as well. Maria was warm and funny, with a gift for making people feel at ease. She helped Rebecca in the kitchen, played with the children, and told stories about Thomas that made everyone laugh. The visit lasted 2 weeks, and when it was time for Thomas's family to leave, there were tears on both sides. But they promised to visit each other regularly, to maintain the connection that distance had strained but not broken. "You have built a good life here," Thomas told Rebecca on his last evening at the ranch. "I am proud of you, little sister. You survived something terrible and came out stronger. You found a good man, raised beautiful children, created a home. That takes courage." "I had help," Rebecca said, glancing at Lucas. "I had someone who believed in me." "We all need that," Thomas agreed. "Someone who believes in us when we cannot believe in ourselves." After Thomas left, Rebecca felt settled in a way she had not before. She had reconnected with her last link to her old life, and it had not diminished her new life but rather enhanced it. She was Rebecca Monroe, wife and mother and rancher, but she was also still Rebecca Allen, the girl who had grown up in Houston with dreams of adventure. She was all of these things, and she was enough. As Michael and Sarah grew older, they became more involved in the ranch operations. Michael learned to work cattle, to fix fences, to handle the challenges that came with ranching life. Sarah developed an unexpected talent for the business side of things, showing a gift for numbers and negotiation that impressed even Rebecca. "She is going to run this ranch someday," Lucas said proudly one evening, watching Sarah pore over the account books. "She has your mind and my stubbornness. Nothing will stop her." "What about Michael?" Rebecca asked. "Michael will always have a home here, and he will always be part of the ranch. But Sarah has the gift for it. Michael's heart is elsewhere, I think, in the wide open spaces, in adventure." Lucas was right. As Michael grew into his teenage years, he became restless with the confines of ranch life. He wanted to see the world, to have adventures, to test himself against challenges beyond the familiar boundaries of the Double M. "Let him go," Rebecca told Lucas, when Michael announced his intention to join a cattle drive to Kansas at age 17. "He needs to find his own way, just like we did." Lucas struggled with letting his son go, but he understood the need for independence. He had rebelled against his own father's expectations, after all. So he gave Michael his blessing and his best horse, and he watched his son ride away with pride and terror warring in his heart. Michael returned 6 months later, taller and leaner and more confident. He had seen the world beyond the ranch, and he had discovered that while he loved adventure, he loved home more. He settled back into ranch life with renewed appreciation, and Lucas and Rebecca breathed easier. Sarah never had the wanderlust her brother did. The ranch was her world, and she was content to master it in all its complexity. She learned from her parents, from Cole, from the hands, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. By the time she was 18, she was effectively running the business side of the operation, freeing Lucas to focus on the cattle and Rebecca to focus on other pursuits. Rebecca had begun writing in her 40s, setting down the story of her life in careful script. She wrote about the stage attack, about Lordsburg, about Lucas and the Double M. She wrote about survival and belief and the power of finding someone who sees your truth. When she finished, she put the manuscript away in a trunk. She did not know if anyone would ever read it, but writing it had been cathartic. It had helped her make sense of everything that had happened, helped her see the pattern in what had once seemed like random tragedy. Lucas found the manuscript one day while looking for old ranch records. He read it in a single sitting, emerging from his office with red-rimmed eyes. "You should publish this," he said. "No one would want to read it," Rebecca said. "You are wrong. This is a story about courage and truth and love. People need stories like this." But Rebecca was not ready to share her story with the world. Perhaps someday, but not yet. For now, it was enough that she had written it, had claimed her narrative in her own words. In 1900, the new century arrived with hope and promise. Michael was 25, married to a sweet girl named Emily from a neighboring ranch. Sarah was 22, unmarried and showing no signs of wanting to change that status, much to her parents' bemusement. "I have the ranch," Sarah told them when they gently asked about her romantic prospects. "Why would I need a husband to complicate things?" "Because love is not a complication," Rebecca said gently. "It is a gift." "Maybe someday," Sarah said, "but not now. I am happy as I am." Rebecca and Lucas celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over the territory. Even some people from Lordsburg attended, including a very elderly Mrs. Kelly, who hugged Rebecca tight and told her she had always known she would do well. As Rebecca looked around at the gathered crowd, at her grown children and her devoted husband, at the ranch that had become her whole world, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had survived the worst and found the best. She had been disbelieved and vindicated, rejected and embraced, broken and mended. And through it all, she had been loved by a cowboy who had believed her when no one else would. Lucas found her standing alone on the porch late in the evening, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come," Rebecca said. "About how different my life might have been if you had not believed me that day in Lordsburg." "I will always believe you," Lucas said. "That is my promise, my gift, my commitment. Your truth matters to me, always." Rebecca turned in his arms and kissed him, a kiss that held 25 years of love and partnership and shared struggle. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "I love you, Lucas Monroe," Rebecca said. "Thank you for believing me." "I love you, Rebecca Monroe," Lucas said. "Thank you for letting me." They stood together on the porch as the party continued inside. Two people who had found each other in the aftermath of tragedy and built a life more beautiful than either could have imagined. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of sage and promise, and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. Rebecca had everything she needed: a home, a family, a purpose, and a man who believed in her truth. She had survived, she had thrived, and she had found love in the most unexpected place. And that, she thought, was the greatest gift of all. The years that followed were peaceful ones. The Double M continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful ranches in the territory. Michael and Emily gave Rebecca and Lucas 3 grandchildren, 2 boys and a girl, who spent their summers running wild on the ranch just as their father had done. Sarah eventually did marry, at age 30, to a quiet lawyer from Santa Fe who had come to Lordsburg on business and fallen instantly in love with the fierce rancher's daughter. They settled in a house on the edge of the Double M property, close enough for Sarah to continue managing the ranch, but far enough for them to have their own life. Lucas and Rebecca grew old together gracefully. Lucas's dark hair went silver, and Rebecca's developed elegant streaks of white at the temples. They moved a bit slower, tired a bit easier, but their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with time, becoming something rich and comfortable and utterly dependable. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Rebecca back to the ridge one more time. They rode slowly, no longer the young riders they had been, but still capable in the saddle. They stood together looking out over the ranch, over the life they had built, and Lucas took Rebecca's hand. 40 years, he said wonderingly. "It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "We have had a good life," Rebecca said, "better than I ever dared to dream." "Do you remember what I asked you the day I proposed? I asked if you had any regrets." "I remember, and my answer is the same now as it was then. Not a single one." Lucas pulled her close, and they stood wrapped in each other's arms. Two people who had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, who had raised children and built an empire, who had loved each other through everything. "They said you made it up for attention and pity," Lucas said softly, remembering that terrible time in Lordsburg. "But I knew the truth. You wanted neither attention nor pity. You just wanted belief. Someone to believe your truth, to stand beside you, to say, 'I believe you,' when the world said otherwise. You gave me that," Rebecca said, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. "You gave me everything." "No," Lucas said, wiping away her tears with gentle fingers. "We gave each other everything. That is what love is, Rebecca. Mutual belief, mutual support, mutual choosing. Every day for 40 years, I have chosen you, and I would make that same choice every time." "As would I," Rebecca said. "As would I." They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of gold and rose. The house was full of family, their children and grandchildren waiting to celebrate with them. There was laughter and food and music, all the things that made life worth living. That night, lying in bed beside her husband of 40 years, Rebecca thought about the long journey that had brought her here. From the terror of the stage attack to the despair of Lordsburg, from the tentative hope of those first days at the ranch to the deep, abiding love that had sustained her through decades. She thought about the woman she had been, frightened and alone and desperate to be believed. She thought about the man who had offered belief when she needed it most, who had seen her truth and honored it. She thought about the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice, and she thought about how sometimes, in the darkest moments, salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it comes in the form of a tall cowboy with pale blue eyes and a heart scarred by old grief. Sometimes it comes in the form of a job offer and a place to belong. Sometimes it comes in the simple, powerful words, I believe you. Lucas rolled over in his sleep and pulled Rebecca closer, even in unconsciousness, seeking her warmth. Rebecca smiled in the darkness and closed her eyes, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. She had been believed, she had been loved, and she had built a life worth living. That was her truth, her story, her legacy, and it was enough, more than enough. It was everything.